Looter shooters are at an interesting place in gaming. As much as I love them, and as much as they've become one of my favorite genres, they've proven to be pretty hit and miss over the years. Many of them seem to follow the same pattern in their life cycle. Everyone gets hyped out of their minds when the game gets announced. The game launches horribly and it doesn't meet anyone's expectations. And eventually the game's going to become the polished product that everyone expected from the beginning. That's the hope, at least. This is the live service video game. And it's unfortunate that many of them follow this pattern. It's really sad that we live in a time where a game working at launch and living up to what was promised is something that should be celebrated. Releasing broken, empty, and shallow games happens so often now that it's almost tolerated by people. Few looter shooters have gone against this pattern and have set the standard of quality we should expect from these games. Digital Extremes created Warframe, an experience that not only is free, but rivaled some of the biggest looter shooters like Destiny when it came out. Gearbox created Borderlands, the game that pioneered the looter shooter, and in my opinion holds the throne as the best in its genre. And I'm happy to say that The Division 2 has also set this standard of quality. I absolutely love The Division 2. The game has made massive improvements from its predecessor in almost every way. While not everything about the game is great, the smooth gameplay, addicting loot system, and interesting world has me coming back for more and more. And honestly, there's no sign of me quitting anytime soon. In The Division 1, a smallpox virus broke out in New York City, having devastating effects. The city suffered massive casualties, was overrun by gangs, and was reduced to pure anarchy. The virus began to spread all throughout the United States, having the same effects on multiple cities. One of these cities was Washington, D.C., and is the setting for The Division 2. D.C. is now an abandoned, desolate wasteland. The only people that remain in the city are some civilians, very few military personnel, and gangs who have established territories throughout the area. The city has been completely taken over. The United States government has activated a group of sleeper agents called the Division in order to restore order and to take back control of Washington, D.C. So this is basically the premise of the story, and it's basically the same as the first. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that, because there's obviously a story in this game. There's a ton of characters, cutscenes, there's people talking everywhere. So there's obviously a story, but honestly, I just didn't really pay attention to it. I've never been one to get invested in video game stories. It's just never been a huge factor for me when enjoying a game. Unless, of course, I'm playing something like The Last of Us, The Walking Dead, or God of War. It's just never really been my thing. But the premise of the game is awesome. I love it. I love the vibe. I love everything that's going on. I get the gist of what's going on, and that's good enough for me. I feel a sense of urgency and responsibility with trying to restore order to the city. And the world is so well realized that it completely adds to this. Many people have said that the story is fantastic. I don't know, I can't really say, but I do love the premise and the vibe of everything. I can say though that whatever story is in this game seems much more interesting than games like Destiny. Throughout the main story, you'll find videotapes showing some of the crazy things that have been going on throughout the city. These videos kind of expand on the story, and they also add a sense of realism to the world. I was actually really surprised by these. They're pretty freaking awesome. Some of them are pretty intense too.
You good? You ready? All right, man. Emmeline will know of your courage. They all will.
Remember me, man.
Always, brother.
You're good. Stop him!
For some reason, I haven't really played many Ubisoft games. I've never been that into Assassin's Creed, I've dabbled in Far Cry a little bit, and I've never even touched the Watch Dogs franchise. After playing this game though, I think I want to get more into their games because this is one of the most beautiful and detailed open worlds I've ever seen. The world is so well designed that it makes it clear that the city was once lived in, and it's pretty obvious what must have went down when the virus broke out. I love the small details that show this, like car accidents, parked vehicles with doors and trunks wide open, ambulances with gurneys around them, and abandoned luggage everywhere. You can tell that the city had been desolate for a while because there's overgrown trees and vegetation everywhere. The world just tells a story on its own, and I think it's just so cool. That being said, as awesome as the world is to look at, exploring it is another story. I got bored of it pretty quick, honestly. I found that the only initiative you have to explore is to find loot, supplies, and some random collectibles. I mean, finding these items are important for the game, but it really just feels like busy work. I was finding better loot by doing missions and actually completing objectives in the games, so I just ended up doing that instead. I've heard many people talk about how fun the world is to explore, and I can see that to an extent. At the beginning, I was really interested in it, and I don't know, it kind of got boring for me. There's a ton of cool stuff to look at, and there's an insane amount of detail, but that's basically it. I absolutely love open world RPGs, Fallout 3 easily being one of my favorites. A huge part of what makes these kinds of games fun is the world. Fallout is designed to be explored. The devs deliberately design these worlds in a way that is compelling to explore. You can tell that something may have happened there that provides a story. Sometimes you find new quests, you find unique gear. Each area just feels like it has a specific reason to be there. Now, you can argue that you could do all of these things in The Division 2 as well, but I don't think it's the same thing. I bring this up because I realized pretty quick that the world that Massive created here is not going to provide that same experience as I would get in Fallout 3 or Skyrim or games like that. And this isn't a criticism, it's just not that kind of game. Yes, The Division 2 is an open world RPG, but it's a looter shooter first. That's what the game is. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. I do have to say though, as far as a looter shooter goes, The Division 2 takes the cake for having the best open world. I compare this to other looter shooters like Borderlands and Destiny. They're not really open worlds per se, but just open areas, but this blows them out of the water. As I mentioned earlier, the world is pretty desolate. There's hardly anybody around, and the city has basically been abandoned. Because of this, the city has been overgrown with plants, trees, and is inhabited by wildlife right now. And I was really impressed with how far they went with this. There's wildlife everywhere. This makes the world feel so alive even though the city is basically abandoned. I love how seamlessly the world, missions, and encounters all flow together. There's zero loading screens when going from area to area, mission to mission. It's just all part of the world. When going to complete a mission, I enter the area or building that the mission is located in, and when I've actually completed the mission, you leave the area and go right back into the world. There's zero load screens. This is super impressive, and it creates a much more immersive experience. I'm happy that this exists because the small amount of loading screens that do exist take quite a while. They can get pretty long. So one of the few things that kept me playing The Division 1 was the gameplay. The cover system felt amazing, the weapons felt powerful, and killing enemies felt satisfying. I was happy to see that this was only improved upon. They kept what worked. They only improved upon the gameplay slightly. They made some small tweaks that helped the overall moment-to-moment gameplay flow smoothly. This was fantastic because the gameplay in The Division 1 felt a little janky at times. So if you've ever played a looter shooter, you know that you shoot things. A lot. That's basically all you do. Shooting and looting. This can get incredibly repetitive, and I think The Division 2 handles this very well. There's so much to do in this game. You have main missions, side missions, random encounters, control points to take over, bounties, projects. There's an insane amount of ways for you to gain experience. The interesting thing is that all of these activities eventually lead to doing the exact same thing. Like I mentioned earlier, you're just shooting everything in sight. It can get pretty repetitive, but with the many different types of objectives, missions, coupled with finding new loot, makes it a lot more interesting. Also, here is a little word of advice. If you want to level up fast, play with other people. If you want to have the best experience as possible, play with other people. Hands down, the game is best played that way. The game scales quite a bit when you have a larger party, and it can actually get pretty difficult at times. But I've had some pretty intense moments and some fun gaming sessions playing with other people. But find people that will actually play with you. If you have friends that are playing the game, that's definitely the best option. It's pretty annoying when you join a group and you're looking forward to have some fun playing with people, and every person is just on a different side of the map doing their own thing, so it's like pointless. So yeah, the gameplay is awesome. For the most part, it runs pretty good. It's pretty solid. But I've still experienced some weird bugs here and there. Just the other day, one of the ambushers shot me with an arrow, and the arrow just floated above my head forever. It was kind of annoying. It's just like a little bug. It was the only time it ever happened. There were glitches where one of my teammates was stuck in the crouching position, so they were just sliding on the floor around on their knees and just were like that the whole time playing. There was another bug I had that was actually pretty annoying. I got into an area expecting to take a control point. During this fight, another mission got triggered, so I was dealing with 2 missions at the same time. It was horrible because there was people coming behind me, in front of me, the side of me, and I was trying to tackle 2 missions at once. I was pretty close to getting it, but I ended up getting killed. It was just annoying because I'm trying to take this control point, and now I have to deal with more enemies coming from literally every direction. But honestly, there wasn't that many bugs. Things like that don't happen very often. The level design is incredible. I would say that the level design and the open world is probably where the Division 2 has made the most improvements compared to its predecessor. I remember missions in the Division 1 being so repetitive and boring. They basically looked all the same, and there really wasn't much variety to them. That's not the case here at all. Main missions are varied and interesting. You get to go to the Air and Space Museum, American History Museum, the Lincoln Memorial, Roosevelt Island. That sounds really boring, me saying it, but these missions were awesome, and they all felt super unique. The Air and Space Museum is one of my favorites. Throughout the mission, you're going through all these different exhibits throughout the museum. One of the exhibits was a big room with a giant projector showing a film about planets and stars or whatever, and I'm just in this huge firefight in the meantime. It was awesome.
Friendly down.
The leveling system in this game is incredibly deep. You level up, gaining experience, choose different perks, and buy different skills. That's pretty straightforward. But the depth is in the weapons, gear, and mods. So like any looter shooter, you're constantly finding weapons and gear that is slightly better than the last. In this game, you have many attributes to think about like gear score, armor rating, skill rating, health, and this is just for the gear you wear. With weapons, you're looking at damage output, fire rate, reload speed, accuracy, stability, damage drop off. Weapons come with all different kinds of perks. You can mod your weapons with sights, extended mags, skins, grips, and all of these mods can offer completely different stats. You can even mod all of your gear like holsters, vests, gloves. It's pretty insane, man. And what really impresses me is that this is totally optional. You're not forced to think about these tiny details for your character. Someone can just pick up the loot that clearly shows it's better, or the weapon offers more damage, and they can just pick it up and move on. It's incredibly deep, but still simple to play. One of my gripes with the Division 1 was actually creating your character. It was pretty limited, and I was hoping that they would change this in the Division 2, but it barely got an upgrade. The options were still pretty limited. It basically got upgraded to having as many options as Destiny's character creation system, which honestly isn't saying much. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that finding loot can be pretty underwhelming because all the weapons and gear are so similar. This makes sense because the Division is supposed to be grounded in reality. We aren't going to find these jacked up crazy weapons like in Borderlands or Destiny. But once I started to get into the end game, my feelings about this started to change. The weapons still aren't crazy different, but I'm just finding really powerful stuff with crazy stats. And it's now just becoming so addicting to finding just better gear. I don't really know what happened. It just kind of clicked. I also got really into modding, which makes it a lot more fun. Massive has done a pretty good job of making sure that there's still a lot of variety in what you can do, even though a lot of the loot you get feels kind of the same. The Division 2 has given me hope for live service games. Massive has set a standard for how a game should work at launch, the amount of content a game has at launch, and just how to make it fun as hell to play. The world is interesting, the gameplay feels great, level design is amazing, and there's more customizable loot than you will know what to do with. I really hope that developers and publishers are going to look at the Division 2 and are going to try and meet these standards with games in the future. Do yourself a favor and go pick up this game. It's one of the very best looter shooters you can play right now. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be making more videos like this. You can follow me on Twitter, and that link is in the description below. I'll see you guys next time. See ya.